Welcome back to ZoeTV. It's so fun to be in the studio, huh?
I love it.
And we are taking a little bit different approach this time because we are doing some things by Zoom.
Right.
We've done it a couple times now. So let me explain in case some of you are new or just to review. Our Resident of Inspiration is a weekly segment that has been put on hold because of a lot of reasons. But what, has it been a month that John Smith?
It's been almost a month since John Smith did his nomination.
Smith, yes, and he actually nominated Jim Ogan with Lois coming on and talking about Jim.
And accepting the
And
nomination.
everybody, we talked it all through, and she was so gracious to accept. And I don't know, if you spend any time with Lois, you know that's what she does anyway. She's so good at promoting other people, and she's so proud of Jim and his life accomplishments. I can't wait to hear what she has to say, but I know it will be heartfelt, and it will be fun to hear her perspective. You know, we're so used to people talking about themselves, but it'll be an interesting
It will. It'll be the first time that we've had one of these. And when John Smith came to us and said, we're thinking of this nomination for Jim, and we said, wow, we know we're going to have to do this interview with Lois.
Right.
And it's going to be tough. It's going to be an interesting dynamic. And then COVID hit and the holidays hit, and here we are on Zoom. But I'm really looking forward to hearing her words, because I know the context. I know you do as well, the history of the two. But we're going to give her plenty of time to explain. We want this show to be about that dynamic. Because it's the first one we've done like this, and so we're not going to try to squeeze in an employee and get another interview. We want to let Lois run with it.
And be honoring of what she wants to say.
Yeah, it's exciting. So looking forward to that interview.
Me too. Well, this is a good day. We are welcoming Lois Ogan as our Resident of Inspiration, and she is exactly that, inspiring. So welcome, Lois.
Thank you. I'm all ears.
Oh, well, we want you to talk also.
Yes.
So
Lois, this interview has been a long time coming, since before the holidays. And you traveled, you got out of town, you visited family, and when we got back, the world kind of tilted again, and here we are, and we're doing it via Zoom, and you're down in the Performance Center before anybody else. Is it kind of weird down there by yourself with Gerald?
Not really, because I come early in the morning. There aren't a lot of people here ever.
There you go. So this is kind of unusual for you. That's good.
That's comfortable. Well, I know we could talk about your life, which we want to, but we would need a couple hours. Do you know her history?
I don't. I know a little bit to be dangerous, but you probably know more. But I know the mission and everything that they've experienced together and out and about.
Incredible. So, Lois, for those who don't know about you, tell us a little bit about your background.
I was born and raised in Southern California. Both my parents were university professors.
Oh, where?
My mother was home most of the time, but my dad was a math professor and then later went into administration. And so education and church were always the most important things in our lives. I think I probably went to church when I was old enough to be carried out of the house and go. And so that's been my life since before I was 1. It's never been away from my life. I went to private schools because my dad was this was years ago, he was in California education and felt that he did not want his children in that kind of education. And this has been 80 years ago. So I went to a private school for all the way through the 10th grade. And then the 11th grade, my dad retired from his teaching and went to teach in a Christian high school, junior college setting in Los Angeles. And so we moved there, and my dad was then the dean of the school. That happens to be where I met my husband. So we knew each other when I was 16 and he had just turned 18. And then when we graduated from high school, I went away to Seattle Pacific University because my father was in that system. Los Angeles Pacific College was part of that system. So I got half tuition paid, which was really nice. I wanted to be a nurse, had wanted to be a nurse since I was about 5 years old, and that was my goal for life, and I knew that I would never survive if I didn't complete that. Well, I could, when I was out of high school, I was only 16, so I couldn't go to nurses training right away, so I went to college so that I could do my first 2 years at Seattle Pacific, then graduated from the University of Washington, and that's where I got my nursing degree.
Wow.
Jim followed me to Seattle, and when I was still in the last year or so of college, and he was still in college, we were married. And he had various jobs at the time, but he, I guess I need to go back to when we were in high school. And I actually worked for my dad in the registrar's office. And my dad left me. One morning we had a student that came late to school. And he wanted me to wait for him. And so I did. When he came, I locked up the office and I said, we're going to go around to the chapel. And he said, chapel? In school? And I said, well, maybe you didn't know this is a Christian school. And on the first week, whenever we have a new semester, we always have a week with evangelistic services. And so I said, that's where we're going. And we got in there, and it so happened, my dad was in charge of the chapel services, and he pretty much ran the high school and junior college. And he had arranged to have a man by the name of Jim Voss, who had been saved in the Billy Graham Crusade in 1949 in Los Angeles. And he was from the Chicago Mafia. And he told a story about how he was in Chicago, and he was a convicted felon, but he was out on parole, so he could not carry a gun with him. But he was walking the streets. This is Jim Voss talking. He was walking the streets, and he had a gun on him, and the police called him over. And he knew that he was not going to go to prison. If they took him in the car, he was going to shoot one of them because he was not going to go back to prison. So he was very, very nervous, and they called him to the car, and he walked over with his hand in his pocket on the gun. And as soon as he reached the car, they got an emergency call, and they took off. When he turned around, he was standing in front of one of the Chicago rescue missions, and he went inside. And that's the first time he ever heard anything about Jesus Christ or anything like that. And eventually, he came to know the Lord through the Billy Graham Crusade. He told his story in that high school auditorium. And Jim was so convicted. It was so close to himself. He was on parole because he had been in prison for a year, in a men's prison in California. And he was so convicted, he literally ran sobbing to the altar and gave his heart to the Lord that day.
Wow.
It turned his life around immediately.
Wow.
He never looked back.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And
I don't want to interrupt you, Lois, but I want to find out, John Smith nominated Jim for the Resident of Inspiration, and your name has come up in its own right. But hearing that story and watching what he's done through his life and knowing the examples of, faith that he led by and led so many, when that Resident of Inspiration was done by John Smith, and you caught wind of that, and it was kind of a moment where our John Smith said, is this the right thing to do? We weren't sure. And I think we all agreed that, you would appreciate the fact that he was nominated and that he meant so much to this campus and to be recognized. And what were your thoughts on that? I mean, it kind of flash forward to that moment. What's your takeaway from that?
Well, I needed to give you that little piece there because that's what drove Jim's life, the rest of his life. He was so changed from one thing to another that never left him. He never turned back, and he was always affirming people and helping people go forward and do. He always wanted to learn more, understand more. And I wrote down a couple of things that I thought might be interesting. What I felt helped him be the inspiration that he was. One of them, he's never forgot what God did for him. That was the prime thing in his life. Never forgot what he came from. A very insignificant life with almost no education until he met the Lord. And then he had one semester left for a PhD, but he felt he couldn't do that because it took money we didn't really have. And he said it was more important for him to be with people and tell them about the Lord than it was to put more letters behind his name. He never complained about anything. As sick as he could be, he never complained, which was so encouraging to everybody around him. Mm-hmm. He would do things when everybody knew that he could barely walk, barely talk, but he would get up and do it because it was the right thing to do. Mm. He was thankful for every single day. He looked at every day as a gift. We talked about that many, many times since we came to Glencroft. He felt that the Lord led us here, and we were here for a purpose, and he loved Glencroft, loved the people here. He always appreciated what others did or accomplished. He was the first one to say thank you, the first one to pat somebody on the back, the first one to offer help if they needed it. He was an excellent listener. And he could listen by the hour for people. In fact, the whole last years of our missionary service was traveling the world where missionaries were that needed encouragement. And that's what we did. We went to their homes. We've probably been in 50 or 60 countries. And when he'd go there, they'd say, oh, well, we want to show you this in this country, or we want to demonstrate that, or we want to see this or that. And he'd say, no, that's not why we came. We came for you. We want to talk to you. We want to help you with your family. What kind of issues are you facing today, and how can we help you with it? And so he'd start out and he'd say, what's the very best thing that's happened to you since you've been in this particular place? It was new culture, new language, everything was different. What's the best thing that has happened to you? And then he'd say, tell me of the very worst thing that's happened. And so they'd tell their stories, and that led us into their lives where we could begin to help them. Then he'd say, where do you want to be in 10 years? And they'd say, oh, I've never thought of that. He said, it's not too early to begin thinking. If you don't have a goal, you'll never get there.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
He was always proactive. How can I be a part of this, or how can I help you? What else do you want to know?
Oh,
it's an amazing tribute to hear you speak of him. I know it's it's new and it's fresh, and we kind of had talked offline about, wanting to do this segment with you and if it was appropriate. And I just think it's so endearing to hear you speak of him in this light. And he did influence this campus so much. And, he's one of the guys that, the pulse of this campus beat by. And I know he had his inner circle of guys and girls, and I just think I just got to touch on it just a little bit. I know, Kaye, you did for sure.
Well, yeah, and he was partly or mainly responsible for bringing Joel here. So that was a huge gift to Glencroft.
Yes, he was. He was. We were the ones that knew who he was, that he was available, and so that's how he got here. And I think Jim kind of lived with Joel for the first few months to help him, because he'd never lived in a place like this. He didn't really know where to go or where to begin. But Jim always was looking for people that needed help. And so we hadn't been here in Phoenix very long, even with his working here at Glencroft. He went to visit because he had been president of a Bible seminary in Medellin, Colombia, in South America. He always felt that education for pastors was so important. So he went to visit Phoenix Seminary. He wanted to visit the president there, made contact with him. And while he was there, he said, "What are you doing? What is Phoenix Seminary doing for Hispanic pastors in the city of Phoenix?" And the president looked at him and says, "Nothing." And I remember him coming home to me and saying, "I can't imagine not taking advantage of what they have here." And so our sons were working, actually our younger son owned a business here, one of the commercial bakeries in town. And when he started that business, they had, one of the things he put into the contract was that they would tithe every single month. And that tithe went to Phoenix Seminary to start a whole program that gave scholarships to Hispanic pastors here in the Phoenix area.
Wow.
He was just like that. He would look for opportunities. How can people be helped?
Well,
wow.
That's
quite
another
a
part of
tribute.
him.
We appreciate your words. I know that since the holidays kind of came and went, you've gotten through COVID. You feel healthy, right? You're feeling pretty good?
Oh, absolutely.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know too many people on this campus that can keep up with you. I know I watch you move around and walk, and I know you've had your physical stuff throughout the time, but I just appreciate getting to know you. I know that you were, when the Performance Center was working at its prime and working on all cylinders, you really got a good routine down there. You working out, working on your balance and strength. And what words would you say to encourage our residents when we open back up down there to take advantage of that?
Well, one thing I've learned through COVID, when I couldn't come down here, I decided to look on, I'm not a television watcher. I never have been. I don't have time for TV. But I decided to see what he had on television. So I myself have been doing ZoeLife, the Tai Chi, the whatever, all those different programs. And I found I can really do very well just by staying home and then walking around campus the rest of the time. And I'm sorry that I missed that. I could have done it when Jim was sick and ill, but I didn't have the energy to do it at that time.
Yeah.
But I think that we should all plan our day. Another thing I do, before I go to sleep at night, I tell myself, what am I going to do tomorrow? What can I accomplish tomorrow? What needs to be done? What can I do? And that's what helps me go from day to day, a goal of what I'm going to do. And when I finish that goal that next day and I go to bed at night, I thank the Lord for the way that he's blessed me, the way that he has given me strength and energy to accomplish that. And every day there's something that I get done. It may be just going through a horrible looking drawer, cleaning everything out, organizing it. Maybe it's going through boxes of stuff that I still have to get rid of. But goals are incredibly important.
Yes.
Well, we loved having you on the show.
Yes,
you
Lois.
are amazing. Great testimony to your man. And I think John Smith gave an amazing nomination in your family. And with our last 30 seconds or so, who is your nomination for us for next week?
I would say June Wang, because she was one of the first people I met here on campus and has been so gracious and such a marvelous worker in her own right, and now taking care of her husband and so forth. I think she's probably one I'd say gives me a lot of inspiration.
Absolutely.
Oh,
we love
good
June and we
choice.
love Gil. I think that's a great nomination.
Yep.
So,
All
well,
right.
thank you for being on. I know it's not like the old days where all powwow together and group hug at the end, but we appreciate you jumping on via Zoom and technology and sharing your inspirational story.
Thank you, Lois.
And thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Wow, Kaye, what a show.
Yes.
I mean, I love, it's a love-hate with technology, right? That we can facilitate this and keep this needle moving forward with resident inspiration and other interviews. But I miss that sense of, man, I would have loved to have Lois right between us.
I agree.
Talking this thing through, because her story is so impactful and it's so heartfelt, and we just can feel it, and we have the pulse on what this meant to her, and to give her the entire time just to speak to Jim. I mean, I had goosebumps.
And it was just interesting because it wasn't just about him. We got to know her history too.
That's right.
And how fun to hear. You know, one thing that always, I don't know, hits a chord with me is she grew up in California.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but it seems like most people you meet in Arizona grew up in the Midwest or the East,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
So all of us growing up wanted to grow up in California, but it's fun to meet people that actually grew up and her parents were in the school system in California. And so it was enlightening and fun to hear about her journey too.
I think so. I think that she really, if you didn't know that dynamic of the two of them and you heard that story for the first time, maybe you just moved here and was like, oh, you really got a sense of what they've done on this campus together.
Yes.
And
they
the
have done
impact
a
they've
lot.
had from day one, and the way the two of them really have framed out getting Pastor Joel here and set the table for so much that's in place on this campus due to their two dynamics.
Right. And it's always fun to hear someone speak so kindly and honoring of somebody that's impacted their life for most of their life. And so it was a delight.
It was a delight.
I really loved it.
And I think that her nomination of June Wang
Yes.
is exciting. We're able to touch on all these IL residents so much. And I just think June and Gil's dynamic, they've been with me since Beta 1.
I know.
And they, I've watched them two push each other down there. And to watch how Gil gets after it and how June really makes sure he's being cared for. And not to mention, I love her cookies. Just gonna throw it out there.
That's a good thing to throw out because
if she happens to bring some.
Right. Or
I think it
send them
actually
up
might
early.
be in the cookbook. I think she has an unbelievable recipe in the cookbook that's coming. I keep
Well,
seeing it go by. June.
We would probably need to try those, I would
say
think,
so.
but
June, if you're out there, we love cookies.
who doesn't?
All right, so Kaye, great show.
It was super great.
Again, technology's great. I'm thrilled we could do it. I'm thrilled that we're preaching what we're saying to everybody out there, that we're socially distanced.
We are.
She's down at the Performance Center. We're walking the walk. And even though we're off and running in a lot of the Performance Center and the walking paths and things are somewhat coming back with the vaccine, we still got to be careful.
Right.
So,
All right.
there you go. Appreciate
Carry
you.
on.
Thanks, guys.